welcome back to my channel. So I do just want to make another video because I have only just uploaded one because I've only had the ability to do that yesterday, to make that video yesterday. But I think there's just like more I want to say about the same kind of topic, like that's come and stemmed from a situation that happened to me that I really I thought was quite unfortunate and difficult. I definitely think I just want to talk about not even necessarily the logistics of what happened, but as a relatable, hopefully, situation that's happened to me and how my mind's been open to certain stuff. And I guess potentially this is adulthood for you and going from a more secure kind of system in school or whatever to the big bad world, if you like. And I don't think it is the big bad world, and there's definitely a sense of life experiences taught me that most of the world is good. So these kind of situations I have the resilience to be able to manage when this sort of stuff comes up. But it's definitely apparent to me that people can definitely get the wrong opinion of you, and people may misjudge you, and they often do because of their own wounds, either displace their own wounds upon you or treat you unfairly as to what you believe you deserve and what you know you are, right? So I'm going to just clarify here. I think life experience happens to people, and I think life makes you the person you are. And what's unfortunate to me about the whole idea when people mistreat you, and even if it's a mistake, to be fair, people aren't perfect, but this is why you can't be fully trusting of people, even in a system that has some sense behind it. And awful things happen to people in every walk of life, but the most safest, most protected person in the world, even people that've got security guards and stuff, someone can come along and shoot them. No one is not able to be hurt in the world. We are all vulnerable to one level or another. But people, for reasons I believe, and I've done so many videos on narcissism, which I do stand by, whether, I'm not saying narcissists are the be all and end all of the scum of the world, and no one should ever deal with them, but I do know and stand by the idea of narcissistic abuse, and the way that it comes through in the world, and also the way that on a subconscious level these patterns are prevalent. It's not a conscious thing. They've learnt this pattern through their lives, and I'm not saying people can't necessarily control. I don't know, I don't want to talk about narcissism now, but from that level, it's horrible when, as someone that's gone through the mental health system in the past, we all have different experiences in life, and I think different things can happen to you, different advantages and disadvantages in life, the type of carers you have, the type of person you are, the type of places you go, the societal benefits that may make you appear more lucky in the world, or actually more stressed in the world by negative attention and things like that. But obviously people make judgments of you throughout your life, is what I'm saying, and people get a good or bad end of the stick in that. I definitely believe even things through money and everything like that can be a factor. And what annoys me about the situations I've experienced, and it's really not something new, but it's something that I'm seeing more and more clearly, especially in systems that are very much needed but are also very new in the world. I think there's always been corruption. I'm seeing more corruption in a moderated sense. I mean, it's just moderated in a I think the same thing goes for the world in systems, right? And it's the same thing in a job. You're going to go through, and I've gone through 6 jobs, something like that. One of the managers were toxic, from what I could see, but the rest of them weren't. And that is just the way it goes. And, you know, the same thing goes, because no system is perfect. You're going to get some people within a system that doesn't necessarily, it's not a perfect system either. It's, and this is what I'm talking about, the advancements of the world that have come in the last 100 years or whatever, and the way that 50 years ago it was all right to rape your wife and no one would bat an eyelid about it. You know, the world is even though it's not technically a developing country by standards of geography, it's not a perfect world in any sense, and there is still going to be systems and situations where people will take advantage of their power, and they will try and kind of bring about issues or wrongly victimize someone for things that will not have necessarily had an impact that was harmful, you know, and it's not going to be understood or validated by potentially a certain person or a certain, you know, it might not be looked upon well by like a certain situation or person or group of people within an organisation or whatever, which can have negative consequences. And this, as I've mentioned in my last video, is really damaging because of the way the world has developed. You need people to stand up for what makes sense and what is right and just, because the honest truth is as well, it's ignorance of certain people and their own traumas and their own issues, and their own, you know, and bearing in mind the boomer generation, they were literally smacked they grew up, they were literally beaten for things that they did as a child, and unfortunately that has massively scarred their generation, and it has really put a massive strain, I feel like, even though school systems and the legislations and everything have made such a great job to correct the way that people are like chastened these days in like school. I say chastened, are like, so it sounds so old fashioned, but you know, are managing the children, and it's made such a positive difference to the way that my generation, like Gen Z and maybe younger millennials or millennials in general probably, have come out. But unfortunately boomers have this difficult and problematic mentality when it comes to not only projection on people and projecting the way that they were minimised, and you know, because we do perpetuate trauma, that's life for you, and I'm not saying that, you know, life experience doesn't kind of iron you out in some level. I think that's a bit of a general statement. I think in general, I think you can build resilience from a situation even it can humble you, but I think naturally we're built to protect ourselves, and we're not naturally to allow ourselves to be humbled. If you're going to sit there and in a freeze response, that's an indication of trauma to me. And unfortunately, I always said before, when you do have a traumatic past, and when you do have an incidence of abuse, and you do have incidents of mental health issues, you do have incidents of vulnerability, disabilities, autism, ADHD, things like that, and you haven't got, or you've got a natural vulnerability that anyone does, to be fair, but especially things like really particularly vulnerable people in society, parents, mothers, children, there's an even people of ethnic minorities, anything like that, you've got a particular I feel like pressure on you when you're dealing with all other factors surrounding culture, and even anyone of any culture or religion, to be honest, that people don't see from the outside, or they may not even have knowledge of. They may not understand, they may misperceive because of their own cultural upbringing or their own traumas. And I think this is also an issue when people have cultural misunderstandings in one culture. For example, gypsy culture, right? And I definitely relate to aspects of this, and I would consider myself of that. I wouldn't consider that my nationality, but I've come from Irish upbringing, and that is mostly the culture that I would relate to, honestly. And in that kind of a culture, it's very much like women are very much like I would say women, but women and children, it's very much, I'm trying to pick an aspect of it, but do you know what? I don't care if it sounds stupid, it just is what it is. Are very much like dressed up in a very kind of party-ish way from a very young age. It's very much about the fuss of the lifestyle. It's very much like puffy dresses and little bits of makeup, maybe not loads of makeup, but kind of, you know, you might have a little bit of a drink earlier at like a family party, and you know, I do think there's a kind of, it's just very communal based. People are very, I feel like, generally very respectful of each other's kind of respect to a certain degree that I don't really want to explain all the ins and outs of. But in a different culture, and I think often cultures are about respect, but possibly in a very different way. In some cultures, you know, you completely have to cover yourself completely, and it's very much about they don't want to share their they don't feel it's appropriate to show, especially with women, I think generally, but I don't know if it happens to men as well, their face or their body, because it's seen as disrespectful to men and the rest of their society and their groups. And it's just a complete polar opposite, to be honest, of, and I'm not saying like the less clothes you wear it's not like that, but sometimes the cultural differences can appear very confusing, especially when you could get someone. I don't want to talk about the misconceptions that can happen, because it's just, you know, it really varies, and none of them are valid anyway, so it doesn't matter. But what's challenging about this is in society, when you get people where there's a culture clash and there's a clear misstepping of boundaries. So and I guess this is where things like disciplinary systems come in to put you in a potentially more I don't know. I don't want to say disciplinary systems particularly do anything, because they don't necessarily do anything. They don't teach you things. They're not like a school. It's not like therapy where you can oversight things. That's not really how it works. But what I can mean is life experience in general, regardless of disciplinary systems, because I think they are very broken, to be honest. And I do like in many ways, in terms of the way that they support different cultures and the ways but they don't want to perpetuate. Just as they don't want to perpetuate people's trauma, they don't want to perpetuate people's negative actions. Because I'm not saying that the blame face is completely with authorities, because obviously you're going to get grey area everywhere you go. But I definitely think that when you've got you're going to have you know, people obviously that you know, sitting down, having a bit of time out to think about their actions, wherever that may be, or any sort of disciplinary action may in the long term or the short term benefit them, because it can make them see the wrongs of their actions, and potentially, even if they still believe that they made the right decision, just at the time, just prevent any sort of fast, quick anger in the future that can be avoided. So and kind of deter that. That's really what that sort of system I feel like is for. When it's like I say the disciplinary system, what I mean is more the police system and things like that. It's much more of, I feel like, obviously just like a disciplinary system, but a deterrent also. But my issue with that, I don't really want to get too deep into it, is when people are like wrongly accused, and I think racial things are not always taken into account. Mental health, disabilities, things like that can be really, I feel like, underrepresented in certain situations that I've seen. And, you know, you've got to hope that sometimes things adjust, but when things are done like out of self-defense and things, but like otherwise we'd live in a very different world if these things weren't taken very seriously, I suppose. But there are certain countries where the crime rate is so low because of the way that the country works and stuff. And, you know, I can't speak completely for the whole of England and the whole of England's system or whatever, or the whole of any country's system, but, you know, I've heard in like Nordic countries and stuff, their crime rate is very low, but they have a very good way of managing their country, and they've got very like particular systems. I can't speak for all countries because I honestly haven't got experience of all countries, but, you know, when you've got someone even from a biological nationality of a certain country, they see someone and assume that not only their opinion is wanted, and that they're invited to share their opinion with someone that doesn't want to hear it, to be honest, regardless of how developed or underdeveloped your country is of origin, or where your roots are. But also, they might misconstrue your behaviour as being something that they do or do not feel is right, and make that judgment. And, you know, it depends what the consequences of that are. So I'm not going to ramble too far onto that, but what I mean is I'm not going to talk about how good or bad England is, because there's more developed and less developed countries than England. I feel like it is what it is. You live where you are and you can always move. But you know, I'm just saying the crime rate in England I don't think is as good as in certain other countries where they've got these really, really amazing systems where, you know, they allow you to do drugs. All drugs are legal in certain places. I'm not saying that drugs are the answer, but, you know, in England, if you're caught with drugs, that's like a massive issue. And you know, even in certain states, like marijuana and stuff has been legalized. And I'm not saying like that's the answer to the world's problems, but I'm just saying even things like when I was at school, they made you bring your tie right up to the top, and it's things like that where, like, obviously in balance, does it really matter whether your tie's all the way to the top or not? Like, on my perspective, the school has got the way they want to conduct themselves, and I'm not saying that is going to be good or bad necessarily, but what I mean is, you've got places in America, for example, that let you wear your own clothing. I don't know what the psychological effects of all that stuff is, but what I'm saying is, when people are either marginalised in society or they have issues of any kind, and society or their circumstances have not validated them, it's really challenging to assert yourself for anyone. And I think, you know, violence and stuff and crime in general doesn't really have a place in what is morally right and just in a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world. There are always going to be murderers. There are always going to be, and I don't want to make this too dark, there are always going to be people that are misled and dangerous. Okay, and there are always going to be people that are you know, gonna cause some level of harm to you. And often it's from a misled place, and it's often from a place of inferiority or need for control or something like that. But you know, I'm not validating these people, but again, they may have come from circumstances, and I don't want to validate like murderers and stuff particularly, but they may have come from a place where they've been extremely invalidated throughout their entire lives, and something inside their mind breaks, and they think, I need control. I can control a situation. If I murder someone, that will give me a sense of power and control. And I believe that is probably why most of the people that have murdered have done what they've done. And I don't know that for certain. I'm not saying it's right and that they shouldn't be put in prison for it. But what I'm saying is, the cards you're dealt in life have a massive part to play in the circumstances that you get, and the behaviours you have, and the benefits you have, and the behaviours you have. And I'm not saying people can't heal, and I'm a massive advocate for healing and self-reflection, meditation, healthy lifestyle, spiritual health, self-reflection, discussion. I've had years of therapy, even mental health help if it's needed. You know, I'm the biggest advocate in the world. I've been a support worker, 100%. You know, I'm an advocate of rehabilitation, if they want to call it that, in the police system, 100%. I think it's all very positive. The mindset, but I think in practicality, it can be very damaging, actually, to people as well. So obviously, you know, this country and probably other countries will manage the population the best way they can in mass, in a one-size-fits-all system, in the best way they can with the legislation that they have been given. And I don't know, it's about someone coming forward to make more legislation about situations or something to create more balance and health to our world. And to be fair, there are lots of things, especially now, and this is the thing, the world is so new compared to how it was 50 years ago. You know, you'd never have autism and stuff wasn't even discovered back then. You know, disabilities weren't considered. You know, and even, I'm not being funny, generations like the boomer generations have come from parents in the generations where things like autism were not considered, where mental health issues were not spoken about, where if you had a mental health issue, they knew nothing of it. You went to a hospital, or you would have done back then, but it wasn't going to be treatment in the community. If you had a mental health problem, you'd be bunged in an asylum, and that's what they used to call them before mental health was more widely spoken about and understood, and you would be dealt with over there. And you know, and that would be how that generation would have seen that. And you know, you might have gotten better and come back out into society and been potentially reintegrated, but there was a massive shame on it as well. So you know, when you've got people of my generation and stuff that have had and experienced mental health problems because of biological dispositions that have been proven because of past relatives and stuff, which you can't control, and that is part of the cards you're dealt in this life. People don't, you know, it's not always considered in the way that my generation would, and that's the world that we're moving into. And this is why I've mentioned in my past video that boomers and their generation are completely are outdated in many ways, and it's not good for the world to operate in a mindset that is outdated. And obviously the system, and I'm aware, isn't perfect, and it needs work, and it needs consistent updating. And you know, it's not going to be perfect now, and it's not going to be perfect ever, potentially, but it needs improvement. And the way they currently manage it at this time in life is not good enough, in my opinion, and it's not functional for many people, considering the actual, what was I going to say, the severity of the consequences that can come to someone who is near innocent, to be honest, or has experienced a hardship which has resulted in a reaction that potentially could have even been fatal to another person. I'm not saying it's okay to go around murdering someone. And in an overview perspective, saying if you murder someone, you go to prison for life, is almost accepted, right? And I'm not saying that is, but what I'm saying is someone's manslaughter situation, you can be driving a car and someone can walk into the middle of the road and you can run them over, and your whole life can be over. And it happens to so many people, and that is extremely difficult for me to get my head around, because that person has had no ill intent. They may have done nothing wrong in their entire life, and that one day has ruined someone's entire existence in that moment, in that life. And it's just it was never intended. And I get the idea that it deters people from pretending that they you know, doing a hit and run and calling it a mistake. Okay, so yeah, obviously it's got its benefits, and I kind of I wouldn't say benefits, it's got its logic to a level. But imagine being someone that's happened to, and until on a small level it's happened to me, where I believe I was I don't want to say incorrectly treated necessarily, as much as sort of there could have been a way that I would have managed myself that hasn't been managed in that particular way, because of systems that have processes that mean that that, you know, things have taken a turn for me, not taken a turn, but you know, I've had some issues that have come up that were beyond my control and were not necessarily useful to me, basically. So you've got to hope that there is some justice in the universe, and this is where I'm struggling to kind of I'm not going to even like talk about the universe. How am I supposed to know about that? But it's like it's these circumstances that really need to be re-looked at. People's I believe consequences. And you know, I'm a young person. I've not seen the world. I have seen the world. That's a lie. I've seen the world, but I don't understand how it can be justified to put someone in prison for running someone over that walked in front of their car, potentially even for 10 years, right? I don't know what the time lengths are. 10 years is a long time. It's a long time, you know, and maybe that's less bad than a you know, but I'm not saying like they should change, but what I'm saying is bad things can happen to good people, okay? And I've experienced it, and people that didn't deserve the circumstances that either caused the reaction that they did. Because let's not lie as well, as much as society loves to, especially in this country, condition us out of our natural strength and our natural need to protect ourselves, which honestly is the exact way we're wired and the exact way that we are built. They love to convince us that we live in this friendly world, and to be honest with you, we're a social race. But when it comes to our own self-protection and our own self-respect and our own points of view and our own health and our own decisions and our own freedom, we are very individual in that we will protect it. And that is the honest truth. And the injustice to me comes where you've got a scenario where there are people that are protecting their rights, and they're protecting their own justice, and they're protecting their own God-given sovereignty and their own God-given life and their own God-given circumstances and their own God-given health for the world that we live in, especially for people that have got issues around mental health. They've got issues around trauma that have caused mental health problems or that have triggered those mental health problems on a genetic sense. When you've got a disposition, you've got people of ethnic minorities, and you've got people of cultural beliefs and religions and stuff that have been at a disadvantage to people that haven't had those particular roots. And something happens and things happen that trigger someone to react, and then they get put into a situation that in balance they were only acting in a healthy way. And I understand the world and people need to have patience with each other, and I believe this situation that I've gone through now will make me think twice before I react in the way I did in the last experience that I had that has caused this problem. But at the same time, on a level, when you look at my circumstances and the circumstances that have led to a situation, I do not think that I was acting incorrectly, you know, given the circumstance that happened to me. But I was still blame, you know, it's regardless of blaming and this and that, it's a broken system, it's a broken world. And I'm going to stop rambling now, so I've spoken for half an hour about this. I highly doubt anyone's got this far, but I'll probably watch it back at least. Maybe. But yeah, whether this has just given anyone some validation or food for, I don't know, but it's nice to make a video because I haven't made one in ages. Thanks for listening.